Hey everybody, I'm Jody Vance,
And I'm George-Affleck.
and it's time for
Vacation all I ever wanted. Vacation all I ever wanted. UnSpun.
So Funny. Hey,
Oh,
are your taxes done?
yes. And I'm taking a vacation, just so everybody knows off the top that
Oh,
the
right,
reference to
that's
that
why.
song is so if people who are big fans of ours, we will be taking a hiatus for 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
Well, I'm trying to do the math. I get back on the 20th. So I'm going on a road trip that's very far away. To Amanda's dream trip. Big number she's turning. I won't say what it is. And she's a lot younger than me though. And so we're heading away.
Everywhere.
Well, I'm still
So,
going to be working, but I can only do so much when I'm on the road. And doing a
so
podcast is
we'll
a tough one.
we'll be back for the Thursday, the 25th of May. So we're basically on for the better part of a month.
That's right. Unless huge things happen, then we'll find a way, of course. Of
Right. I could
course.
always record it and we can find a way to put it out there. So, but it's up to you because you know what? You deserve a vacation and I will be here working. Because there's a lot going on, George. Let's get to it. And I was asking
Yes.
about your taxes. Mine are not yet done, but I'm hopeful that they will be completed. I'm one of those people who definitely usually gets ahead of this, is
Uh-huh.
well ahead of the like surge that happens where people are like, oh, it's tomorrow. The deadline is actually this Sunday, right? The last day of April
Mm-hmm.
is the deadline, but because it falls on a Sunday, it's actually the 1st of May that the deadline is. But then
Yes.
with this PSAC strike, the the CRA is impacted, and there's some discussion as to whether there should be some sort of extension for people. But if your taxes are dated on the right day, it's all good. But in some instances, for people that are getting a refund, it's like, I want my money back.
Yeah, that's me. That's the question I have. Sure, yeah, great if you're paying, get an extension on that. But I mean, who don't we all file digitally now? Where is the human in this process really? I mean, I guess there's humans who go over your tax statements, or do they just, there's a process for that. So clearly that's going to take a while, but I'd like to get my money back, but I guess that's going to be delayed. So everything's getting it delayed. That sucks. Ugh. I can
It
imagine
does.
a less how shall I put this? Unsupported people on strike than the tax people. Sorry,
Yeah.
tax guys, but not the most
Way to
beloved
flag
people.
yourself, George. Way to flag yourself on that one. I'm not with George. I think you all deserve a raise.
I'm just
No.
saying, I'm not saying I don't love them. I love tax people. I love accountants. I love bookkeepers. That's a very important part of my business. And in fact, I have clients who are bookkeepers. So,
I was
but I
just
think that
joking.
if you're
Stop
looking for people
peddling.
out there protesting on the street, which I see every day,
Yeah.
I don't hear a lot of honking horns for them. So it's got to be a tough one for them. So I'm
You know what?
sympathy.
Shachi Curl just put out a poll on that. The numbers aren't off the top of my head, but just about public support
Oh yeah,
of this particular strike. And there isn't a lot. Like there are people that are like,
yeah.
I'm going to say the government employees have it pretty good based on what we're seeing in other areas. And certainly there's a reason to want, that sort of Me Too thing
Hmm.
where they see other areas, following along with
Yeah.
inflation numbers and what have you. But we're just in such a crazy spot right now.
Hmm.
Let's get into some of the things. So, like, since we're talking money, let's bring it back provincial.
Yes.
And we were supposed to mention this last week, but it fell off
Yeah.
the table because we were so busy with other things. Our credit rating
Hmm.
not so great. We're taking a bit of a hit. Explain.
Yeah, it's interesting. It sort of didn't get a ton of play, but we got knocked down to a double A rating by one ratings group. That's where they assess a provincial's management of money and debt and how they can
Yeah,
handle it. And while it doesn't on the surface mean a big deal, it's not a huge deal. It does actually affect the interest rates that the province gets when they borrow money significantly. So it could be a 1 or 2 point difference in borrowing money, and so it makes it much, much more expensive to borrow money because the interest
right.
rate's higher. It's like a mortgge. So
Yeah,
it's
a
very,
couple of points
very.
can be like, oh, when
You're
you're
borrowing
talking
hundreds of
big
millions.
dollars.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's not good. It's a statement of the fiscal management of the province. Of course, they blame the pandemic, they blame the economy, they blame this, they blame that. Um, But it was kind of predicted by me several years ago this would happen, even
think you
before
did
the
too.
pandemic, because they were
Yeah.
spending so much money. It's always a tough
Yeah.
balance, I mean, we talk about spending money here a lot, about prioritizing spending and schools and healthcare and that kind of stuff. But before the pandemic, they were spending stuff, and actually even recently, you sort of wonder when they're spending a bunch of money on stuff. You're like, really, on that? So it's always a question of,
Museums.
yeah, things like that. I mean, that's important. Like the
It's important, but it's not
TES,
$1 billion important. It was
not when
like,
you're
whoa. And
you're in
yeah,
debt, when you're seeing $1 billion, when you've got
yeah.
it. Anyways, they can thank the Liberals, or now the BC United, for many years of constraints, but and that was their undoing, because families first. Remember Christy Clark? She didn't live up to that one, and as a result, didn't get delivered another majority or even a minority, or government. She was given the boot. And now we have what we have, a massive NDP majority. So yeah, it's not a good thing, and it's something that doesn't seem to be a concern to most people right now, and I'm worried that it's going to have a huge effect on our long-term financial management of this province.
You know what I'm hugely worried about, and I feel super helpless whenever we talk about this because we talk about it once a month.
Yes,
Um, the overdose crisis, like
I know.
seven people
Yeah.
a day are dying. And when people think overdose crisis, they immediately go to the downtown east side, but that's not
Mm-hmm.
where it's happening. It is happening across the province. It's happening in
Mm-hmm.
apartments and
Yep.
condos and homes, and it's predominantly middle-aged men who perhaps were either hurt in their job and medicated, and then medicated too far, and then were cut off of those opioids that were pain meds that were prescribed to them, and then
Yep.
they are addicted, and then it spirals. Or it's a recreational drug user. We all know somebody who has dabbled and then
Mm-hmm.
been ashamed of that and then used alone. So again, every time I bring up the overdose crisis, I like to stress the point that if you are struggling with an addiction, please don't use alone. Please don't.
Mm-hmm.
Trust somebody. I mean, I have known and loved numerous people who have struggled with addiction. I'm very lucky to say that I don't struggle with addiction, but loving somebody who does is very, very difficult because
Yeah.
they feel such shame, even as you're trying to wrap your arms around them. And sometimes they hide, and it's that hiding right now that's killing people. So let's talk about the
Mm-hmm.
overdose numbers that we're facing right now in this province.
Oh, I mean, I guess the argument can be made that the whole drug policy is not working, as far as the not the legalization, but certainly this whole, yeah, the
Decriminalization.
decriminalization. Is that, maybe it's too soon to say, but it doesn't seem to be the silver bullet to, that's the wrong terminology, maybe, in a situation, I'm not sure,
I
to
know what you
this
mean, though. It's
problem. I
hard
mean,
to talk about it.
there is no
Yeah.
short-term solution that's going to change this. We have people who are getting injured on the at work, and then being prescribed medication, and then that ends, and then they get desperate, and then they go in the street, and then they take drugs, and then they die. And so there are many levels of problem there. And I know that there are organizations like the ICBA who spend a lot of time trying to educate their employers and employees across this province about, because ICBA represents a lot of independent construction workers, for
Yeah.
example, who are a big
Yeah.
chunk of these people that are dying. It's so that's maybe one way to start, education. But then it's like, who's prescribing these things, and why is it so casually happening? It's not just in
But
BC
that
either.
tightened
This is
up.
happening
Okay.
everywhere.
It is. It is. But that did get tightened from a government perspective from the College of Medicine.
Right. So maybe it's a lag time
Physicians,
here.
there might be some of that, but there's also like not a lot of wiggle room between what existed, which was kind of like, you get some and you get some and you get some.
Mm-hmm.
And then it went, nobody gets any.
Yeah.
And so somewhere
Right.
in there might have been the mistake, and how to correct that mistake, especially when you can't even, in some
Yeah.
instances, secure yourself a physician who even knows your name, because you're
Yeah.
going to the walk-in clinic, or you're going from
Yeah.
doctor to doctor to doctor to
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And that's nobody's fault. I think, honestly, George, if we were to unspin this, in my novice opinion, it's that we are all spending so much time looking for someone to blame, looking for the villain, looking for the reason, that we're missing the opportunity to actually just start somewhere with what might change it for the better. And we've talked about this so many times, and you just mentioned that this is not a provincial problem. It's not a Vancouver problem. It's not a BC problem. It's not a Canada problem. It is a worldwide epidemic. And nobody's figured it out yet. And lots of people are talking about, forced addiction treatment, like forcing people into care. Others have said that just simply does not work. And then there's the, we're just going to have this great amount of empathy for everybody who struggles in this way. And then you find yourself, normalizing, stopped at a red light and seeing somebody absolutely tripping out on some drug, or maybe dropping their drawers and defecating in the middle of the road, because that's what's happening. And it's just like, there was a time where somebody would slip and fall on the sidewalk and you'd have 5 people run to pick them up. And now everybody's just like,
you walk right past them.
I know. Can't. That's the part that makes me sick to my stomach.
Yeah, I know. I have in my back parking lot where my office is, and sometimes in the front, there is people that are sound asleep. But I think sometimes, are you alive? And have on occasion when it looks dire, have gotten really close to them and said, "Hello, are you okay?" And
I look in to see if they're rise and fall of their chest without getting into their personal space, where they might feel,
I know,
but they're sleeping during the day, because at night it's dangerous. Like, there's so much here that we never thought we'd be perhaps living in. But we bring up the opioid crisis, we bring up the overdose numbers, because it's important to have these conversations, and yet we keep having them without really any meaningful answer to what
it goes
here. So
I know we've talked, it's housing, it's healthcare, it's mental health care, it's drugs, it's policing, everything. Speaking of policing, we were debating whether to do the show tomorrow, because the big announcement tomorrow. What is it?
9:30 Friday morning. Solicitor General Mike Farnworth will be making his decision known. The announcement is coming as to whether or not Brenda Locke will get her way. The mayor of Surrey will get her way. No, well, she said that, right?
I know.
That's her way. She wants the RCMP to stay and stop the transition to the SPS, which was her predecessor's mission. And so is it Surrey Police Services that is already well on their way to being established, or is it the RCMP that will continue? Right now, I can only imagine what it might be like to be an officer with either side of that, to see law enforcement so divided, because you have to pick sides in this. And that is just so wild. I don't know if you see the trolls on social media on either side, but as somebody who's just watching and waiting for it to unfold, obviously I'm aware that my partner in Linda Steele is married to the chief of the Surrey Police Services, Norm Lipinski. And I'm sitting next to Linda, watching her, just waiting for this. And she's like, somebody, and I'm
sure he can't tell her,
something.
And so she's got to be tortured by not being able to talk about this at home. So it's got to be brutal.
I don't think he knows.
You don't? Oh yeah. Well, he probably knows now.
I hope so. Jeez, I hope so. But from all accounts, like honestly, George, I've asked around from my circle of colleagues, right? My regular, usual suspects, the people that I know, the journalists that I know who would be tapped in at the Ledge, people that I know who'd be tapped into Surrey, people that just in general, we all talk, the media all talks, the undercurrent of it to do our due diligence and find out from multiple sources. Nobody knows. There are people that think, I think they're probably going to stick with the RCMP, or, I probably think they're going to go with Surrey Police Services but nobody's like definitively, this is what's happening. And usually there is some of that, to be honest with you, but I've actually
I've heard speculation, and it'll be my speculation. I'll give you my speculation. I should meet Keith Baldry's as well, similar thoughts. I just think that if you're looking and you're weighing, certainly on a spin side too, when you think about the communications and the challenges that the RCMP have had, or currently haven't, seem to always have, the fact that, do they have a plan for Surrey? No, not really. That's not how they operate. They are a national police force. They do things in a different way. They're having challenging finding people to recruit.
Rurally. They're not having troubles in the
No.
big city centers, but they are responsible
Well,
for
yeah.
rural as well. So they're pulling people in,
Yeah. I mean,
leaving
they
the rural.
recruit. Yeah, but you
Yeah,
don't get to
yeah,
go to the big cities until you've done your time. And the
no
RCMP
question,
has
no
yeah.
question.
So
Yeah,
I think they're going to weigh on the side of the Surrey police force. I think they'll go for
do
it.
ya?
It's going to be very expensive for Surrey, but yeah, I just think that it gives them the ability to be more nimble in dealing
Yeah,
with their local issues, which are significant. The
yeah.
RCP continue to have problems, whether on the East Coast, wherever it is, there's always these problems. No, of
Oh
course,
my
there's
gosh.
problems in
Not
the
even just
Vancouver
that,
police
but
force. We have problems in all police forces, it seems, but it seems to be
sexual assault
endemic.
and harassment. Sorry, I'm talking over you, but to jump in there, because you've touched on a bunch of stuff there. The
Mhm.
assault and harassment, the systemic uh, mistreatment of women within the ranks that has been not just proven but acknowledged and paid out, with very little sort of recovery there, and the recruitment suffers as a result of that. You're speaking
Yeah.
about what happened in Portapique as well. Portapique,
Mhm.
I always mispronounce it, and all
Yeah.
of that around that. But going back to what you said, and full disclosure, one of my very best friends from high school, one of my besties, her dad was a chief inspector with the RCMP. Unbelievable stand-up guy. There are a lot of people who work within the Royal Canadian Mounted Police who are amazing individuals
Mhm.
that are unbelievable. Like, so painting everybody with one big brush would,
No.
which for the interest of just being clear, great respect for those who serve and protect, whether you're wearing the red serge or you're wearing the blue. I also have a cousin who's a sergeant with the VPD. So municipal RCMP, I'm not picking a side, but what I'm looking at in Surrey is the reason, if I understand this correctly, and George, please correct me if I'm wrong, the motivation behind transitioning to a municipal police force was so that that police force wouldn't turn over the way the RCMP does in its deployment out of Ottawa for where people are going. Some stay put, but others,
Mhm.
move around. And with the municipal police force, you get to know who are the bad guys, who are the troublemakers, where are
Mhm.
the hot spots, where are the families who know what's going on but aren't talking to them, and how do we get to know those families so we can get an idea of what's actually going on to da da da.
Yeah.
Like that kind. Wasn't that the whole point in the
Yeah, I
beginning?
think that the Vancouver's ability to keep gang control under control to a certain degree, as compared to Surrey, is a argument to show you that local policing is very effective. I mean, but it's not going to be
Right.
like Port Moody or West Van, where literally the police know your name. Like,
Right.
it's Surrey,
It's
it's a
not the
big
same.
town.
It
So
is big.
I've had stories from friends who live in West Van, and their kid gets in trouble and they got, it's literally like Andy Griffith, for those who are
Yeah.
old
It's
enough
like
to remember.
got
Yeah,
little Tommy down here.
yeah, can you come and get him, or I'll bring him home for you? He's had a few too many
Yeah.
drinks and he's walking home stumbling along the sidewalk. That's not going to happen in Surrey, but I just think that there needs to be a targeted approach to dealing with the crime and the challenges
Right.
they're having in Surrey, and they've had for God. We've talked about. I grew up out there in Langley.
Yeah.
We go to Surrey and get bullied. Not we didn't go intentionally to get bullied, but it seemed like you'd go to the mall in Surrey when you're a 15 or 16-year-old kid. It was there was
The
kids
rough
looking for
part of
trouble.
town.
This was
Yeah.
for Langley kids, it was like, oh, don't. It doesn't seem to have changed that much. No offense, Surrey.
No, no. We talked about that last week because
Yeah,
I
and
grew up in
so
Tawasin,
yeah,
and we would as
it's
the t-shirts say, it's the troubling part of town sometimes. It's tough.
yeah.
It's a rough and tumble. But maybe that's part of this. That's another thing that I've heard in all the discussions around the Surrey Police Services versus the RCMP and how the province makes a decision, because you've said it's going to be a politically motivated decision. They have to know what people in Surrey actually want. So there's polling around this. But also that maybe this is part of a larger move by the province, because they've been kind of dropping little nuggets that going the route of a provincial police, like the OPP, like
Mm-hmm.
the Ontario Provincial
Oh,
Police,
yeah.
where the
Mm.
municipals connect up, and then
So
it's
you
like
think
there's this.
that might be it could be a whole different thing, the announcement. He was saying, you know what? We're going to create a provincial police force, and any city who wants to get in it, that would be interesting. That would be huge.
I think it might. I don't know anything. This is me just pie in the sky in it, but it might be politically strategic for the NDP government to say this isn't about Surrey and the RCMP versus the
Mhm.
SPS. This is about the province of British Columbia deciding to transition towards a provincial police, which would be made up by, a conglomerate. I don't know what the right term is, a collective of municipal police forces that work together. Because right now, it really doesn't feel like a whole bunch of people working together. I got to be honest with you. It
So,
looks
so Norm Lipinski could be the
siloed.
chief of police for the entire police force of provincial, because that's where it would have to start. If that was the kind of announcement you're talking about, they need to make a decision on Surrey, and so the decision, which
Yeah, the
would be
decision would be about Surrey, but the
Surrey, you
RCMP would
get it,
still
but it's actually a
continue.
provincial police force that we're going to create from starting at Surrey.
I don't know that would be
That
the
would be
announcement
interesting.
tomorrow. I think they would say
Why not?
this contract with the RCMP will be the last, however long that is. I don't know
I
how much
see.
runway is left on that. And then the transition comes and you start to build out, because it'll take time. But having lived in Ontario for a decade, it is quite something to have an Ontario provincial police, like
Mhm.
not a Toronto police and a Barrie police and an Oakville police and a Hamilton police. It's just the OPP. You're dealing. Everybody talks to everybody. Everybody's like,
Oh
"What
my
do you got
God, the
over there? Do you know
cost,
this?"
the
Yeah,
cost
I
though.
mean,
Oof. Unless you get
well,
rid
let's
of
talk about.
Vancouver police, which would save us money, maybe, but in Vancouver.
Well, maybe the cost would be shared
Yeah.
in a
Interesting. Well, we'll
provincial
see. I
in a
guess so.
provincial
This is
manner.
9:30. So we're recording this on Thursday,
Yeah,
lunch. This is going to be in the morning on Friday. So tune in,
24 hours from
everybody.
now, we'll know.
See
24
see
hours.
which theory came true from Unspun podcast.
You know what we will do is we can reconnect for a quickie tomorrow. Once this happens, we'll
All right.
jump on and we'll do a 10-minute update, because people will want to know. You know what else people are going to want to know? Obviously, you heard about this, the TELUS Health thing that blew up during the pandemic, because everybody logged on and was able to
Mm-hmm.
access a physician, and it really worked for a lot of people. But because there was payment involved, it broke some rules,
Right.
right?
Private healthcare
That
ish.
Adrian Dix then said, okay, so we're not doing that anymore. We've agreed with TELUS that that's not happening anymore, except for the
Yeah,
people that already did it.
grandfathering, but there's a kind of a, I mean, it was previous things don't count or something like that. So
Yeah.
moving forward,
Yeah.
we're
So
not going
if
to
you
do this.
used it and it worked for you, don't worry, we're not taking your doctor away. And it's
Yeah.
like, sorry, should I have logged on to should I have done
Mhm.
that?
Yeah,
Because
you
I
should have done it last
have
week.
TELUS, like, right. It seems a little odd. Like, isn't there, because I guess what Adrian Dix did say, the health minister did say that those people who have established themselves with a physician they met through TELUS Health is covered by the MSP in the province, right?
Yes.
So and there is sort of a TELUS Health light that won't involve payment of any kind, that will still connect people with some services in some way, but they didn't really say how that was going to work.
Well, there are certain services that are private, right? I mean, dental is
Right.
still private, and
Oh, for sure.
but
Optometrist.
you want to get a body scan of your whole body? There's people who do that privately for a lot of money.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's the kind of stuff that there are a few
It's
clinics
a
on
thing.
I think there's one on the west side up in Dunbar, very fancy
Yeah.
clinic there. They do body scans and all sorts of other, and I think you could pay a membership to be this.
It's a corporate medical center,
Right. So
because you got to
that
protect the
sounds
CEOs,
private to
man.
me, but okay.
It totally does.
So anyways, yeah, that's going to be interesting. I mean, it is. And then we talked about this, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, when the federal court basically said, Supreme Court said, no more arguments on this subject matter.
Right.
We have a national public healthcare system. Don't keep coming to us with your arguments saying, but what about this? What about this?
It's like, we're done here. Stop talking. That's right.
Yeah.
We're done here.
So that really gave the provincial government and Adrian Dix the power to kind of say, stop, we're not doing this. It gives him a weapon now to say, good luck if you want to fight me on this, because you can't.
Yeah. Talk to the Supreme Court, because it's over. The other thing on the provincial scale that I wanted to touch on before we move on, because it's happening now and later this evening, is there are a bunch of rallies planned across the province about just being fed up with the catch and release, that the criminal code protecting perpetrators over victims, and businesses that are being vandalized almost daily at their own cost, that they're just, the protests are coming, the people are starting to just be
I wonder
like,
who's
no,
organizing those.
I wonder. Hmm.
Uh,
Who?
Let me
Unspin it,
think.
George.
Well, I would say Sam, it's a kind of a super PAC, right? It's for the BC United, I would imagine,
Yeah, for sure.
organized.
For sure.
Nothing wrong with it.
The
It
one in
happens quite.
Nanaimo. No?
It's very and clearly this is an issue. And then we talked about this. This was an issue in the city elections. Certainly in Vancouver, the majority that came into power, crime was one of their top topics and
Yeah.
wedge issues, and people were sick and tired of the crime, and they rode that wave into City Hall here. And I would say that that would be the case in several municipalities. So, it'd be interesting. Going to that Surrey, back to the Surrey thing. I'm trying to think where Brenda Locke is on the political spectrum, and if Adrian or if the minister is, and when you said that about where the politics are in Surrey.
With Barnworth?
Are they trying to create
Yeah.
an acrimonious relationship with Surrey's council because they're seen as right of center, which is kind of how it worked in Vancouver in the opposite way with a left-wing government in Vancouver and a right-wing government provincially. It became a very, very negative relationship. I think Ken Sim's trying to not make that happen this time,
Right.
With a right-wing government in Vancouver and a left-wing. But that kind of stuff happens quite commonly, and it's very frustrating because it really is silly. But when you look at how do we divide and conquer an area
Politically, yeah.
So this, whether it be crime or whatever the subject matter, these are very effective politics.
To the detriment of the community. And I want to go to community in this last topic I think we've only got time to touch on one more, which is Chinatown. Something that Ken Sim was very focused on, the revitalization of Chinatown. One of my favorite parts of our city. I've always loved going down there as a kid. I dim sum was my favorite thing to do. I would go down any chance I could. Some kids wanted to go to, the aquarium or the peony all the time, and I'd be like, but can we go to Chinatown too? I just loved it down there. And it's so sad to see how it has just been left to squalor. And a lot of it has to do with, I stopped going down there because I tried to park down there and I literally couldn't find a parking spot that wasn't ridiculously expensive. And I'm like, well, this just isn't worth my produce. I'll go get my produce up on West Broadway where I can still find parking for $1.50,
Right. Yeah, they're creating a flat rate at $2, I think. So I it's a tool. I think the key to success in Chinatown, because when I was in council, they don't want the Disneyfication of Chinatown. They don't want a fake Chinatown. So how do you bring back this culture to Chinatown? Without Disneyfying it. So you give a few tools, you do as many things as you possibly can to drive the private sector to do the job. But it's tough. Yeah. It's tough. I just think that you're looking at you just have to go to Richmond and you find Chinatown.
Right. No, for sure. But
George, that bus around. So
what you just said is so important, because the people who left, the people who had been there since their generations before them built this city, because they did. The people that had lived upstairs and had their, shops, produce shops or restaurants downstairs, who had the Mahjong group upstairs, like the stories and the lore of Chinatown were so rich and thick. Like you say, there was culture, not gentrified culture, not like, remember back when this was a thing, but now we're a bar. No, I agree with you. I agree with you. Yeah.
So, I mean, T&T Supermarket has taken over, like any community where the massive grocery store comes in and sucks. There's T&T Supermarket a block away from China, or kind of within Chinatown. That certainly affects your retail space. So what is that you can do through development, which has been discouraged mostly by people who live down there, including the Chinese community, in how we build buildings down there. There have been buildings that have been turned down because of various reasons that would have maybe helped Chinatown. So they've stopped development down there pretty much. You have on the others, you have the downtown east side on one side of it, and a basically dead zone industrial park on the other side of it, waiting for development. The viaducts that are supposed to come down, the Concord
St. Paul's Hospital.
Yeah. St. Paul Hospital being built a few blocks away.
Yeah.
Main Street, which is whatever. It's just like, and then you're just surrounded by nothingness or chaos, and that's hard to. How do until they fix the Concord Pacific land and get going on the viaducts, it's going to be hard to really create any, you need traffic. Okay, $2 parking, sure, okay. But if you don't have 20 or 30 or 40,000 people living there who will then if you're a person who wants to open, there are great fusion restaurants down there now, which is probably the way it should go, that take advantage of the culture of China and Chinese culture and fuse it with whatever. But that's not going to happen if there's not another 30,000 people living down there, which is the intention, and something that I approved when I was in council, and we're waiting for that to happen. It's just not happening. It's just Concord hasn't moved forward with anything. The viaducts are still there. There's
Why?
no money.
Why hasn't Concord moved forward with anything?
Because, I think they're waiting for, the funding for the viaducts coming down is reliant on development cost levies and community amenity contributions from development. So until they start building and giving the money to the city, it's like this catch-22.
Right. And they won't do it until that's being done. So
the only way this is going to work is if the city bites the bullet and makes a decision either to fix the viaducts or remove them themselves. They just did a microcosm of this, would be the loops on Granville Street when you come off. The city was trying, when I was there, we were trying to, sell the land for a 99-year lease. And as part of that deal, you would get 4 towers, but you had to pay for the removal of these roundabouts. Guess what happened? Nobody, developer wanted to bother. There's, I can't, you couldn't imagine the world with these, that sounds like, I don't know. So now the city's removing them for a lot of money. And these are just little roundabouts. It's costing them, I think it's 30 million or something. It's crazy. Imagine the viaducts to take down is about $200 million to take them down and normalize the streets. So the city and this council potentially will need to make a decision soon of whether they want to do that or just fix these things and build around them. And, there's an argument for both, but with interest
I don't know what's right.
8%, our credit rating is hurting.
I've been spun around so many times on the viaducts. I don't know what's right. All I know is that the in and outs of getting to and from Chinatown, which is what we were jumping off point, and the parking costs in Chinatown were cause for me to no longer go as a local who used to frequent down there, regardless of how much of an experience it was down there. It was just a place that I went to go shopping. It was an easy road. I could go down Pacific Boulevard on the little turnoff off of Prior Street that you can't do anymore. That now you have to go like off, Abbott Street, and then up by Dr. Sun Yat-sen Gardens, up Kiefer Street, and then you're locked in there. And if you go one way, you can't get back the other. And it's just like, nope. So the parking piece and the shutting down of thoroughfares and trying to slow to a crawl the flow of traffic, because we live in a city where nobody wants cars. But the parking piece for me, what has been suggested, which is sort of surge pricing in some spaces in Chinatown, like sometimes there'll be $1, and sometimes there'll be $5 is what it kind of has been. And then they're like, no, flat rate, $2 an hour. If there was a flat rate of whatever that was in Vancouver proper, I think more people would just go downtown, because I have parked my car.
Going to try and bankrupt the city?
No, I'm trying to get people to go back downtown and actually, people don't.
They do. They come on a train now. They come on Canada Line. They come on, they don't drive cars anymore. The same number of cars coming into the city as have been coming in to.
Then it's not bankrupting everybody. Then if it's just if a parking spot's a parking spot, then
if you go to Pacific Center Mall on a weekend, it's pretty busy.
That's not city parking in Pacific Center.
No, but that's people coming from
$29 a day.
People coming, but people are coming from out of. No, they're coming on the trains. There's teenagers. People are coming. Granville Street is crazy now again, like it always has been. People are back.
But I'm talking about again. See, you're taking it to a touristy kind of thing. I'm talking about people who live here using it as the place and space that they have used it. But that's the only solution. People are taking the only solution.
The only solution to get people going back to Chinatown is to make it potentially is it as a tourist destination, which is really
so not for the community and the people that live here. That's your take.
The Chinese community don't. They moved to Richmond. They don't.
No, the community, the people who live in the city. That.
Okay, sure. I mean, I just think I know. I just think.
Why you want to fight with me when we're not going to talk?
No, I just think there's those teeny little shops when you've got T&T and I've got a Chinese massive grocery store 2 blocks from my house. I go to it all the time. Whatever. I mean, I guess it's the question of where does government get involved in this, and where do they lay off? And I don't know if parking at $2 is not going to be the solution for this. It's got to be about building 30,000 units on the Concord Pacific lands.
More towers for George. Got it.
Yes.
Got it. I'll make my point in 1 month's time when we're back on UnSpun Podcast, because we've gone way over time. You can find us on Twitter at UnSpun Podcast, or go and like and subscribe this if you just stumbled across it. Unspunpodcast.com is where we are, but George is the best follow on Twitter at George_Affleck at George_Affleck. I'm at Jody Vance, Jody with a Y, at Jody Vance on Twitter. And be kind out there. We'll see it. Actually, we'll probably do a quick one tomorrow.
We'll see what happens tomorrow.
Friday morning. Yeah, one way or the other, we'll update you on what's happening in Surrey, because we have people who listen to this podcast who really want us to talk about Surrey. So there you go. We did it.
Bye.
Adios. Adios, amigo.